Maya Johnson sat alone at the corner table of the upscale restaurant, her fingers wrapped around a cup of lukewarm coffee that had long since lost its appeal. The gentle hum of conversations and clinking silverware filled the air around her, but she felt completely isolated from it all. Her eyes remained fixed on the untouched salad before her, the crisp lettuce and cherry tomatoes suddenly seeming as unappetizing as cardboard. The day had started like any other, with Maya rushing through her morning routine in her tiny studio apartment. She worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, mornings at a local coffee shop and evenings as a freelance graphic designer. Today was supposed to be different, though. Today was supposed to be her big break. She had spent weeks preparing for the interview with Morrison Creative Agency, one of the most prestigious design firms in the city. Maya had researched every project they had ever completed, memorized the names of all the partners, and even bought a new blazer with money she could not afford to spend. She had walked into that gleaming office building with confidence radiating from every pore. The interview had gone well, or so she thought. The creative director, Mrs. Henderson, had seemed impressed with her portfolio. They discussed Maya's vision for modern branding, her innovative approach to digital design, and her passion for creating meaningful visual stories. For 45 minutes, Maya felt like she belonged in that world of sleek conference rooms and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Then came the phone call 2 hours later. The rejection was polite but firm. They had decided to go with someone who had more experience, someone who would be a better fit for their team culture. Maya knew what that meant. She had heard those same coded words before at other interviews, other opportunities that had slipped through her fingers like sand. Now she sat in this restaurant, using the last of her savings to buy herself what she had planned to be a celebration meal. Instead, it had become a pity party for one. The weight of another failed opportunity pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. At 26, Maya sometimes wondered if she would ever break through the invisible barriers that seemed to surround every door she tried to open. The restaurant was the kind of place where business deals were made over expensive steaks and vintage wine. Maya felt out of place among the suited executives and well-dressed socialites. But she had needed somewhere quiet to think, somewhere to figure out her next move. Her savings account was nearly empty, her student loans were piling up, and her dreams of becoming a successful designer felt more distant than ever. She picked at her salad mechanically, not really tasting anything. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Jasmine, asking how the interview had gone. Maya could not bring herself to type the truth. Not yet. She would have to call her mother later, too, and explain why the job she had been so excited about had fallen through. Her mother, who worked double shifts at the hospital to help pay for Maya's college education, deserved better news than this. The frustration bubbled up inside her chest like a pot about to boil over. She had done everything right. Good grades in college, internships at smaller firms, a portfolio that showcased her talent and creativity. But somehow it never seemed to be enough. There was always someone else, someone who fit better, someone who had connections she did not have. Maya glanced around the restaurant again, noting how easily wealth seemed to flow through this space. Men in expensive suits discussed million-dollar deals as casually as others might talk about the weather. Women with designer handbags laughed over champagne lunches that cost more than Maya made in a week. She felt like an outsider looking in through a window, watching a world she could never truly be part of. Her phone buzzed again, this time with an email notification. Another job rejection, this one from a smaller firm she had applied to the week before. Maya felt her heart sink even further. The pattern was becoming all too familiar. Initial interest followed by polite rejection, followed by the crushing weight of starting over again. She pushed the salad away, having managed only a few bites. The money spent on this meal would have been better used for groceries or her phone bill, but she had needed this moment of normalcy, this brief pretense that she belonged somewhere nice. Now even that small comfort felt hollow and pointless. The waiter approached her table with a concerned expression, asking if everything was all right with her meal. Maya forced a smile and assured him it was fine, that she simply was not as hungry as she had thought. He nodded politely and moved on to attend to other customers, leaving her alone with her thoughts once again. She wondered what her professors would think if they could see her now. They had praised her work, encouraged her ambitions, and assured her that talent would eventually be recognized and rewarded. But talent, Maya was learning, was not always enough. Success seemed to require something more, something she was not sure she possessed or could acquire. The afternoon sun streamed through the restaurant's large windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Maya watched the light dance across the surfaces around her, finding a strange beauty in the way it transformed the ordinary into something almost magical. Even in her disappointment, the artist in her could not help but notice the visual poetry of the moment. She reached for her sketchbook, a habit that provided comfort in times of stress. Her pencil moved across the paper almost without conscious thought, capturing the interplay of light and shadow, the elegant curve of a wine glass on a nearby table, the subtle expressions on the faces of other diners. Drawing had always been her escape, her way of making sense of a world that often seemed chaotic and unfair. As Maya sketched, she began to feel slightly more centered, more like herself. This was who she was, an artist, a creator, someone who could find beauty even in moments of despair. No rejection letter could take that away from her. No closed door could diminish her ability to see the world through the lens of creativity and possibility. She was so absorbed in her drawing that she did not notice the tall figure approaching her table, casting a shadow across her sketchbook. Maya looked up to find a man standing beside her table, his presence commanding yet somehow unassuming. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair that looked like he had run his fingers through it and sharp features that belonged on magazine covers. His suit was clearly expensive, tailored to perfection, but he wore it with the casual confidence of someone who never had to think about money. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth and cultured. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help but notice your sketch." "That's remarkable work." Maya instinctively closed her sketchbook, feeling exposed. She was not used to strangers commenting on her art, especially not strangers who looked like they owned half the city. "Thank you," she replied cautiously, unsure of his intentions. "May I?" He gestured toward the empty chair across from her. Maya hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She was curious despite herself, and honestly, any distraction from her current spiral of self-doubt was welcome. He settled into the chair with fluid grace, and Maya noticed that several other diners had turned to look in their direction. There was something about him that drew attention, an aura of power and influence that seemed to follow him wherever he went. "I'm Alexander Blackstone," he said, extending his hand across the table. The name hit Maya like a thunderbolt. Everyone in the city knew that name. Blackstone Industries was one of the largest conglomerates on the East Coast, with interests in everything from real estate to technology. Alexander Blackstone was not just wealthy, he was influential beyond measure. "Maya Johnson," she replied, shaking his hand and trying to keep her voice steady. His grip was firm and warm, and she noticed he had calluses that spoke of someone who did more than just sit behind a desk all day. "Maya," he repeated thoughtfully. Beautiful name, and clearly belonging to a very talented artist. His eyes flicked to her closed sketchbook. "I watched you work for a few minutes before approaching. You have a gift for capturing emotion in simple lines." Maya felt heat rise to her cheeks. Compliments about her art always affected her more deeply than praise for anything else. "It's just a hobby," she said automatically, then immediately regretted the words. Why did she always diminish herself like that? Alexander's eyebrows rose slightly. "A hobby? That level of skill doesn't develop from casual interest. You're professionally trained, aren't you?" "Art school," Maya admitted. "But I work in coffee shops and freelance design when I can find it. It's not exactly the career path my professors had in mind." Something shifted in Alexander's expression, a flash of understanding that surprised her. "The gap between talent and opportunity can be frustrating," he said quietly. "I've seen brilliant people struggle while mediocrity gets rewarded simply because it comes with the right connections." Maya studied his face, trying to gauge whether he was being genuine or simply making polite conversation. There was something in his eyes that suggested he meant what he said, a depth that contradicted the privileged exterior. "You don't look like someone who's had to worry about opportunity," she said, then immediately regretted her directness. She had a tendency to speak her mind when she was emotional, and today had been particularly trying. To her surprise, Alexander smiled. "Fair point, but you might be surprised by how many doors money can't open, at least not the doors that matter." He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "I have a proposition for you, Maya, something that might sound unusual but could benefit us both." Maya's guard went up immediately. She had heard enough stories about wealthy men making propositions to young women to know where this conversation might be heading. "I'm not that kind of person," she said firmly, starting to gather her things. "Wait," Alexander said quickly, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "Please, it's nothing like that. I need someone to pretend to be my girlfriend for a series of business events. Completely professional, well compensated, and absolutely no strings attached." Maya paused, her sketchbook halfway into her bag. "Pretend to be your girlfriend? Why would you need someone to pretend?" Alexander ran his hand through his hair, and Maya caught a glimpse of vulnerability beneath his polished exterior. "My board of directors thinks I'm too reckless, too unpredictable. They want stability, someone who can calm my impulsive nature. My last relationship ended badly and very publicly, and now every business decision I make is questioned. So you want to hire an actress?" Maya said flatly. "Not an actress. Someone real, someone genuine. The kind of person who sketches in restaurants and speaks her mind even when it might not be wise." He leaned forward slightly. "Someone who won't be impressed by my money or intimidated by my reputation." Maya stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "You don't even know me. I could be anyone. I could be completely inappropriate for your world." "Could you?" Alexander asked. "You're clearly intelligent, articulate, and talented. You have integrity. I can see it in the way you carry yourself, the way you speak. And yes, you're beautiful, which admittedly doesn't hurt for what I have in mind." The compliment made Maya's pulse quicken, but she pushed the feeling aside. "This is insane. People don't just walk up to strangers and ask them to be fake girlfriends. People in my position don't usually have the luxury of conventional approaches to problems," Alexander replied. "I have 3 major business deals hanging in the balance, and my board's lack of confidence in my personal stability is affecting their willingness to support my decisions. I need someone by my side who can project the kind of grounded influence they're looking for." Maya shook her head. "Even if I believed this was legitimate, I wouldn't know how to act in your world. I'd probably embarrass you within the first 5 minutes." "I doubt that very much," Alexander said softly. "You have something that can't be taught or bought. Authenticity. The people I deal with are so used to artifice and manipulation that genuine emotion stands out like a beacon." "And what do I get out of this arrangement?" Maya asked, surprised by her own willingness to continue the conversation. $50,000 for 6 weeks of appearances, plus a complete wardrobe, access to my stylist and personal shopper, and introductions to people who could advance your career in ways you can't imagine." Maya felt her breath catch. $50,000 would solve her immediate financial problems and give her the breathing room to focus on building her design career. It would mean not having to choose between rent and groceries, not having to work 2 jobs just to survive. "Why me?" she asked again. "Out of all the women in this city, why choose someone you've never met?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his eyes studying her face. "Because when I watched you sketching, you looked like someone who understood what it meant to fight for something that mattered. I need someone who won't be seduced by my lifestyle. Someone who has her own dreams and ambitions. Someone who won't confuse a business arrangement with something real." The weight of his words settled between them like a challenge. Maya realized that this moment could change everything. Her financial situation, her career prospects, maybe even her understanding of herself. But it could also be the biggest mistake of her life. "I need time to think about this," she said finally. Alexander nodded and pulled out a business card, writing something on the back. "That's my private number. Take all the time you need, but I'd need an answer by tomorrow evening. The first event is this weekend." He stood up, leaving money on the table that was far more than enough to cover Maya's meal. "For what it's worth, Maya, I hope you say yes. I think this could be the beginning of something important for both of us." Maya stared at the business card long after Alexander had left the restaurant. The thick cardstock felt expensive between her fingers, and his private number was written in bold, confident strokes across the back. She kept expecting to wake up from what felt like the most elaborate dream she had ever experienced. Back in her small apartment that evening, Maya paced the limited floor space between her bed and her makeshift desk. The business card sat on her kitchen counter like a beacon, simultaneously representing hope and terror. She had called Jasmine immediately after arriving home, and her best friend was now sprawled across Maya's bed, offering unsolicited advice with characteristic enthusiasm. "Girl, are you out of your mind?" Jasmine exclaimed for the 3rd time. "Alexander Blackstone?" "The Alexander Blackstone? Do you know how many women would kill for this opportunity? It's not what you think, Maya protested, though she wasn't entirely sure what she thought about it herself. He said it was strictly business, professional. Jasmine snorted. Honey, no arrangement involving a man who looks like a Greek god and has more money than some small countries is ever purely professional. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Maya stopped pacing and faced her friend. What if I mess it up? What if I say the wrong thing or use the wrong fork or trip over my own feet in front of his important business associates? Then you'll be human, Jasmine said simply. Look, I've seen you handle difficult clients, demanding professors, and that horrible boss at the coffee shop. You're stronger than you think, and you're definitely smart enough to navigate a few fancy parties. This isn't just about fancy parties, Maya said. This is about pretending to be something I'm not. What if people see right through me? What if they don't? Jasmine countered. Maya, you've been working yourself to the bone for years trying to break into a world that keeps shutting you out. Maybe this is your chance to get inside and show them what you're really made of. Maya sank into her desk chair. Her laptop opened to a Google search about Alexander Blackstone. The results were overwhelming. Business articles, society page photos, interviews about his innovative approaches to sustainable development. He was involved in everything from green energy initiatives to affordable housing projects. Whatever else he might be, he was clearly not just another wealthy playboy. Look at this, Maya said, pointing to her screen. He's actually done a lot of good work. Environmental conservation, educational funding, job creation programs. Maybe he really is different from what I expected. Jasmine leaned over her shoulder to read. The man is gorgeous, rich, and socially conscious. Maya, if you don't take this opportunity, I might have to stage an intervention. But Maya was focused on a particular article about Alexander's business philosophy. He was quoted as saying that traditional corporate structures often stifled innovation because they prioritize predictability over creativity. It was exactly the kind of forward-thinking approach that had attracted Maya to design in the first place. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. How did the interview go today, baby? I've been thinking about you. Maya stared at the message, feeling the familiar weight of her family's expectations and sacrifices. Her mother had worked extra shifts to help pay for art school, believing in Maya's talent even when Maya herself had doubts. How could she explain that another door had been closed, another opportunity had slipped away? But maybe now she didn't have to. What if this actually works? Maya asked quietly. What if I can use this chance to make connections, to show my work to people who can actually help my career? Now you're talking sense, Jasmine said, settling back on the bed. But there's something else we need to discuss. What? The fact that you're attracted to him. Maya felt heat rise to her cheeks. I am not. Please. I've known you since college. You get that same dreamy look whenever you talk about something you're passionate about. The way you described his eyes, his voice, the way he complimented your art. Honey, you're already half in love with the idea of him. That's exactly why this is a bad idea, Maya said. What if I start to confuse the business arrangement with something real? What if I forget that this is just pretend? Jasmine was quiet for a moment, then spoke more seriously than before. Then you'll deal with it. You're not some naive girl, Maya. You know the difference between fantasy and reality. And maybe, just maybe, you'll discover that the line between pretending and being real isn't as clear as you think. Maya spent the rest of the evening researching everything she could find about Alexander's world. She studied photos from charity galas and business dinners, trying to understand the social dynamics she would be entering. The women in these pictures were all polished and confident, wearing clothes that cost more than Maya's monthly rent. But as she looked closer, she noticed something else. Many of them had similar expressions, carefully composed smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes, postures that spoke of performance rather than genuine engagement. They were beautiful and well-dressed, but there was something hollow about their presence in these photos. Maybe Alexander was right. Maybe authenticity was exactly what was missing from his world. The next morning, Maya called in sick to the coffee shop for the first time in months. She needed time to think, to really consider what accepting Alexander's proposal would mean for her life. She walked through the city, eventually finding herself in the art district where she had once dreamed of having her own gallery. Standing in front of a gallery window, looking at paintings that sold for more than she made in a year, Maya realized something important. She had been so focused on trying to fit into other people's vision of success that she had stopped believing in her own worth. Maybe this opportunity with Alexander was not just about money or career advancement. Maybe it was about proving to herself that she belonged in rooms where important decisions were made. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but something told her to answer. "Maya, this is Alexander. I hope you don't mind me calling early, but I wanted to clarify something from yesterday." His voice sounded different over the phone, warmer, less formal. I realized after I left that I might have made this sound like just another business transaction. The truth is, I need someone I can trust. Someone who won't be influenced by the politics and manipulation that dominate my usual social circle. I think that person might be you. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of decision pressing down on her. "Alexander, I have to ask, what happens if we can't convince people that our relationship is real? What if your board sees right through the arrangement? Then I'll deal with the consequences," he said simply. "But I don't think that will happen. There's something about you, Maya. Something genuine that people respond to. I saw it yesterday in how you carried yourself, how you spoke about your art. That's not something that can be faked." "And after 6 weeks? When the arrangement ends?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment. "Then we go back to our separate lives, hopefully both better off than when we started. You'll have the financial security to pursue your dreams, and I'll have proven to my board that I can maintain stable relationships." Maya opened her eyes and looked at her reflection in the gallery window. The young woman staring back at her looked tired, stressed, and uncertain. But she also looked determined. "I'll do it," she said before she could change her mind. "I'll be your fake girlfriend." "Maya," Alexander said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I don't think there's going to be anything fake about this at all." The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity that left Maya feeling like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole. Alexander had not wasted any time once she agreed to his proposal. Within hours of her acceptance, she found herself in the most exclusive boutique in the city, being measured and fitted by a team of stylists who treated her like she was already royalty. "Remember, you're not playing a character," Alexander had told her during their first strategy meeting in his office. "You're being the best version of yourself. The woman I met in that restaurant, intelligent, honest, unimpressed by superficial things. That's who I need you to be." His office occupied an entire floor of a gleaming skyscraper downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. Maya had tried not to gawk, but the sheer scale of his success was overwhelming. Awards and commendations lined the walls, along with photographs of Alexander with world leaders, celebrities, and business titans. "This feels surreal," Maya had admitted, standing at the windows and looking down at the streets below. 3 days ago I was worried about making rent. Now I'm standing in a billionaire's office, agreeing to pretend to be his girlfriend. How does it feel?" Alexander had asked, joining her at the window. "Terrifying," Maya had answered honestly, "but also exciting in a way I wasn't expecting." Now, as Maya stood in front of the full-length mirror in the boutique's private fitting room, she barely recognized herself. The deep blue cocktail dress hugged her curves in all the right places, and the stylist had worked magic with her hair and makeup. She looked sophisticated, confident, like someone who belonged in Alexander's world. "You look stunning," said Margaret, Alexander's personal assistant, who had been assigned to help Maya navigate the complexities of her new role. Margaret was in her 40s, impeccably dressed, and had the kind of no-nonsense efficiency that made Maya understand how Alexander's empire ran so smoothly. "I feel like I'm wearing a costume," Maya confessed. "The best accessories are confidence and authenticity," Margaret replied. "Mr. Blackstone chose you for a reason. Trust his judgment, and more importantly, trust yourself." The first event was a charity gala for children's education, held at the city's most prestigious hotel. Alexander had explained that it would be relatively low-key, a good opportunity for Maya to get comfortable with their arrangement before the more challenging business events. When Alexander picked her up that evening, Maya felt her breath catch at the sight of him in his tuxedo. He looked like he had stepped off a movie screen, but it was the way his eyes lit up when he saw her that made her pulse quicken. "Maya," he said softly, "you look absolutely beautiful." "You don't look too bad yourself," she replied, surprised by how natural it felt to take his offered arm. The ride to the hotel was filled with last-minute coaching. Alexander briefed her on the key people they would meet, the causes the charity supported, and the kind of conversations she should expect. "The most important thing," he said as their car pulled up to the hotel, "is that we look comfortable together. We need to seem like two people who genuinely enjoy each other's company." "That shouldn't be too difficult," Maya said, then immediately blushed at her own admission. The gala was everything Maya had imagined and more. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over elegantly dressed guests, while servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that were works of art in themselves. Maya felt momentarily overwhelmed by the glamour and wealth on display, but Alexander's steady presence beside her helped ground her. "Alexander," a silver-haired man approached them with a broad smile. "Good to see you, son. And who is this lovely lady?" "David, I'd like you to meet Maya Johnson," Alexander said smoothly. "Maya, this is David Harrison, chairman of the Children's Educational Foundation." Maya shook David's hand, drawing on every etiquette lesson she had ever learned. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Harrison. I've read about the Foundation's work in underserved communities. What you're doing is really important." David's eyes sparkled with interest. "You're familiar with our programs?" "I grew up in a neighborhood that could have benefited from initiatives like yours," Maya replied honestly. "Education was my way out, and I know how much difference the right support can make in a young person's life." As David engaged Maya in conversation about educational inequality and community outreach, Alexander watched with growing admiration. She was not just holding her own. She was genuinely connecting with people in a way that his previous companions never had. Throughout the evening, Maya found herself relaxing into the role. She discovered that many of the wealthy philanthropists were genuinely passionate about their causes, and her authentic interest in social issues made conversations flow naturally. When she mentioned her background in graphic design, several people expressed interest in seeing her work. "You're a natural at this," Alexander murmured in her ear during a quiet moment on the balcony. "I'm just being myself," Maya replied. "Isn't that what you wanted?" "Yes, but I didn't expect it to work this well." Alexander's voice was warm with something that sounded like genuine affection. "People are responding to you in a way they never have to anyone I've brought to these events." Maya felt a flutter of something dangerous in her chest. The way Alexander was looking at her, the pride in his voice when he introduced her, the gentle way he had been guiding her through the evening. It all felt remarkably real for something that was supposed to be pretend. "Alexander, darling." A woman's voice cut through their moment like a blade. They turned to see a stunning redhead approaching, her designer gown probably worth more than Maya's education. "Victoria," Alexander said, his voice noticeably cooler. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "Oh, you know how I love children's charities," Victoria replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She turned her attention to Maya with undisguised curiosity. "And you must be the mystery woman everyone's been talking about." "I'm Victoria Caldwell." Maya recognized the name immediately from her research. Victoria was Alexander's ex-girlfriend, the one whose very public breakup had damaged his reputation with the board. She was everything Maya was not. Polished, connected, born into wealth and privilege. "Maya Johnson," Maya replied, extending her hand. "Nice to meet you." Victoria's handshake was brief and calculating. "Johnson? I don't think I know any Johnsons. What family are you from?" The question was loaded with implication, a not-so-subtle way of asking about Maya's background and social status. Maya felt Alexander tense beside her, but before he could intervene, she answered with quiet dignity. "I'm from the family that believes in working for what you want rather than inheriting it," Maya said with a smile that was all warmth and steel. "I find it makes success much more meaningful." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. But before she could respond, David Harrison appeared at Maya's elbow. "Maya, I was hoping to introduce you to some board members from the Arts Council. Your insights about community engagement were fascinating." As David led her away, Maya caught Alexander's eye. He was looking at her with an expression of such intense admiration that it made her heart skip several beats. She had just held her own against one of the most intimidating women in the city's social hierarchy, and she had done it with grace and authenticity. Later that evening, as Alexander walked her to her apartment door, Maya felt like she was floating on air. "You were incredible tonight," he said. "I've never seen Victoria speechless before." "I was just being honest," Maya replied. "Though I have to admit it felt good to stand up to her." Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her. Maya, I need you to know something. What happened tonight? The way you handled yourself, the way people responded to you, that wasn't acting. That was all you. The intensity in his voice made Maya's pulse quicken. They were standing close now, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. Alexander, she whispered, not sure what she wanted to say. For a moment, it seemed like he might kiss her. The air between them crackled with tension and possibility, but then he stepped back, running a hand through his hair. This is more complicated than I expected, he said quietly. Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Because he was right, it was complicated. What had started as a business arrangement was beginning to feel like something much more dangerous and much more real. As she watched him drive away, Maya realized that her biggest challenge was not going to be convincing other people that their relationship was genuine. Her biggest challenge was going to be remembering that it was not. 2 weeks into their arrangement, Maya found herself in Alexander's penthouse apartment for the first time. He had invited her over to prepare for the most important event yet, a board dinner where several major investment decisions would be discussed. The success of their charade would directly impact deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The penthouse was everything Maya had expected, and nothing like she had imagined. Yes, it was luxurious. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, and the furniture was clearly expensive and carefully chosen. But it also felt lived in rather than like a showcase. Books were scattered on tables, a guitar leaned against one wall, and she could see art supplies set up near the windows. You paint? Maya asked, examining the easel and brushes with professional interest. I try to, Alexander said, handing her a glass of wine. It helps me think. I'm not very good at it, but I find the process relaxing. Maya studied the canvas on the easel, a city skyline at sunset, painted with more emotion than technical skill. You're better than you think. You've captured the feeling of the light even if the technique could use some work. Alexander laughed. Feel free to be brutally honest. I can handle it. I'm serious, Maya said, stepping closer to examine the brushwork. You have a good eye for color and composition. You just need to trust your instincts more. Maybe you could show me sometime, Alexander said quietly. I'd like to learn from someone who actually knows what she's doing. The suggestion hung in the air between them, heavy with implications beyond art lessons. Maya felt that familiar flutter in her chest, the one that had been getting stronger every time they were alone together. We should focus on tomorrow night, she said, changing the subject before her thoughts could wander any further. Tell me about these board members I need to impress. For the next hour, Alexander briefed her on the complex personalities and politics she would encounter at the dinner. There was Richard Morrison, the conservative chairman who disapproved of Alexander's more progressive business practices. Elena Vasquez, the sharp-eyed financial analyst who missed nothing and trusted no one. James Patterson, the old guard member who still believed women belonged in supporting roles rather than boardrooms. They're going to test you, Alexander warned. They'll ask personal questions, try to find inconsistencies in our story. They want to prove that this relationship is just another one of my impulsive decisions. And what exactly is our story? Maya asked. We've been so focused on individual events that we haven't really established a coherent narrative about how we met and fell in love. Alexander was quiet for a moment, staring out at the city lights. We tell them the truth, he said finally. That I saw you sketching in a restaurant and was captivated by your talent and authenticity. That you challenged me in ways I hadn't experienced before. That you make me want to be better than I am. Maya felt her breath catch. Alexander, I know what we agreed, he said, turning to face her. I know this is supposed to be business. But Maya, the way I feel when I'm with you, the way you've changed how I see things, that's not something I can fake. Before Maya could respond, Alexander's phone rang. He glanced at it and frowned. I'm sorry I have to take this. It's about tomorrow night. As he stepped away to take the call, Maya wandered through his apartment trying to process what he had just said. She found herself in his home office, where the walls were covered with architectural plans, environmental impact studies, and photographs from construction sites around the world. One photo in particular caught her attention. Alexander in work clothes and a hard hat, standing with a group of construction workers in front of what looked like affordable housing units. He was laughing at something one of the workers had said. completely relaxed and unpretentious. This was a side of him that never appeared in the business magazines or society pages. That was a project in Detroit, Alexander said, appearing behind her. 200 units of affordable housing, all built to LEED Platinum standards. It took 3 years to get approval and financing, but it was worth it. You don't just write checks, Maya observed. You actually get involved in the work. Money is easy to give when you have it, Alexander replied. Time and genuine commitment are much more valuable. Besides, I learn more from spending a day on a construction site than I do from a month in boardrooms. Maya turned to study his face. Your board doesn't appreciate that approach, do they? They think it's beneath my station. They want a CEO who delegates everything and focuses purely on profit margins. Alexander's voice carried frustration that Maya recognized from her own struggles with narrow-minded expectations. They don't understand that you can't build sustainable businesses without understanding every level of the operation. Maybe that's why you need someone like me, Maya said quietly. Someone who understands what it's like to work from the ground up. Alexander stepped closer, and Maya felt the familiar electricity that seemed to spark whenever they were near each other. Is that the only reason? He asked. Maya knew she should step back, should maintain the professional boundaries they had established. Instead, she found herself moving closer to him. No, she whispered. It's not. The space between them seemed to crackle with tension and possibility. Alexander reached up to touch her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. Maya, The moment was interrupted by the sharp ring of the doorbell. Alexander dropped his hand with a frustrated sigh. That'll be Margaret with the final details for tomorrow. As Alexander went to answer the door, Maya took a shaky breath and tried to regain her composure. She was in dangerous territory and she knew it. Every moment she spent with Alexander made it harder to remember that this was supposed to be temporary, that in 4 weeks she would return to her regular life while he continued in his rarefied world. Margaret bustled in with her usual efficiency, armed with folders and clipboards. Good, you're both here. We need to review the seating arrangements and go over the final guest list. For the next 2 hours, they rehearsed scenarios and refined their backstory. Margaret played devil's advocate, asking probing questions and testing their responses. By the time she left,
Maya felt as prepared as possible for what would essentially be a performance review with stakes measured in hundreds of millions. You're going to be brilliant tomorrow, Alexander said as he walked Maya to the door.
Just remember, these people have spent their entire careers reading balance sheets and profit projections. They're not used to genuine emotion or authentic human connection. That's your advantage. What if they see through us? Maya asked. What if they realize this is all an arrangement? Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her. Maya, I need you to understand something. What we have, the way we talk to each other, the way we connect, that's not an act. Maybe it started as business, but it's become something real. The intensity in his voice made Maya's heart race. Alexander, we can't. I know, he said softly. I know we agreed on boundaries, but I also know that what I feel for you is stronger than anything I've experienced before. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. The fairy tale was becoming too real, too dangerous. She was falling for a man whose world she could never truly belong to, no matter how well she played the part. 4 more weeks, she said, as much to remind herself as to remind him. 4 more weeks, Alexander agreed, but his eyes said something entirely different. As Maya rode the elevator down to the lobby, she realized that her greatest fear was not that they would fail to convince the board. Her greatest fear was that when their arrangement ended, she would have to walk away from the first man who had ever seen her exactly as she was and loved her for it. The next evening arrived with unseasonable rain, as if the weather was reflecting Maya's turbulent emotions. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror, applying the last touches of makeup while trying to calm her racing heart. Tonight would determine not just Alexander's business future, but also whether she could continue to maintain the increasingly blurred lines between performance and reality. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. You've got this. I believe in you completely. Maya smiled despite her nerves. Whatever else happened tonight, she knew that Alexander's faith in her was genuine. She had spent weeks learning to navigate his world, but more importantly, she had discovered strengths in herself that she never knew existed. As she slipped into the elegant black dress Alexander had chosen for her, Maya caught her reflection in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back at her was confident, poised, and ready to face whatever challenges the evening might bring. She was no longer pretending to be someone she wasn't. She was finally becoming who she was meant to be. The board dinner was held in the private dining room of the city's most exclusive restaurant, where power brokers had been making deals over 7-course meals for decades. Maya entered on Alexander's arm, acutely aware that every conversation in the room paused momentarily as heads turned in their direction. She had attended enough events now to recognize the subtle signs of wealthy people sizing each other up. "Remember," Alexander murmured in her ear, "you belong here as much as anyone else in this room." Richard Morrison, the board chairman, approached them first. He was exactly as Alexander had described. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the kind of authoritative presence that commanded attention and respect. His wife, Catherine, clung to his arm with the practiced smile of someone who had spent decades as a corporate spouse. "Alexander," Richard said with a firm handshake, "good to see you looking so settled." The emphasis on the last word was not lost on Maya. This was her first test. "Mr. Morrison," "Mrs. Morrison," Maya said with a warm smile. "It's wonderful to meet you. Alexander has told me so much about your work with the company." The expansion into renewable energy markets was particularly impressive. Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. "You follow our business ventures?" "I try to stay informed about the industries that shape our communities," Maya replied. "Alexander's approach to sustainable development aligns with my own beliefs about corporate responsibility." As they were seated for dinner, Maya found herself positioned strategically between Elena Vasquez, the sharp-eyed financial analyst, and James Patterson, the traditionalist board member. Alexander sat across from her, close enough to provide silent support but not close enough to rescue her from difficult conversations. Elena wasted no time in beginning her interrogation. "So Maya, Alexander tells us you're an artist. How fascinating. Do you make a living from your art?" The question was designed to highlight Maya's lack of independent wealth, to suggest that she might be interested in Alexander for financial reasons. Maya had anticipated this line of questioning. "I work as a freelance graphic designer while building my fine art portfolio," Maya answered honestly. "I believe in supporting myself through my talents rather than relying on others. It gives me the freedom to create art that means something to me personally." "How noble," Elena said with a thin smile. "And how did you two meet?" "Alexander's previous relationships have been rather public." Maya felt Alexander tense across the table, but she maintained her composure. "We met at a restaurant. I was sketching, and Alexander was kind enough to compliment my work. We discovered we shared similar views about using success to create positive change in the world." "And what kind of positive change do you hope to create?" James Patterson interjected, his tone skeptical. Maya had been dreading this question because she knew her answer would reveal the vast difference between her world and theirs. But Alexander's earlier words echoed in her mind. She belonged here as much as anyone else. "I want to use art and design to tell stories that matter," she said, her voice growing stronger with conviction. "I've seen how visual communication can change perceptions and inspire action. There are so many communities whose stories never get told, whose struggles and triumphs remain invisible to people who could make a difference." "That sounds rather idealistic," Elena observed. "Maybe," Maya agreed, "but I'd rather aim too high than not aim at all. Alexander has shown me that it's possible to build successful businesses while still maintaining your principles. That's rare in any industry." She saw Alexander's eyes soften across the table, and Richard Morrison leaned forward with what might have been genuine interest. "Give us an example," Richard said. Maya thought for a moment, then pulled out her phone. "This is a pro bono project I did last year for a literacy program in my old neighborhood." She showed them a series of posters and brochures she had designed. The program was struggling to get community buy-in because their materials looked dated and impersonal. "I redesigned everything to reflect the actual families and children in the program." "What was the result?" Catherine Morrison asked, speaking for the first time. "Enrollment increased by 60% in 6 months, Maya said. Sometimes the difference between success and failure is just helping people see themselves in the solution." Elena studied the designs on Maya's phone with a professional eye. "These are quite sophisticated. Where did you train?" "Art Institute," Maya replied. "But honestly, The most important lessons came from growing up in communities that needed creative solutions to complex problems. The conversation continued throughout dinner, ranging from art and social issues to business strategy and international markets. Maya found herself genuinely engaged with these people, even as she remained aware of their scrutiny. They were testing her knowledge, her authenticity, and her motivations, but they were also beginning to include her as an equal participant in the discussion. The turning point came during dessert, when James Patterson made a casually dismissive comment about government funding for arts programs. These programs are usually just feel-good initiatives that don't produce measurable results, he said. Maya felt her temper flare, but she kept her voice level and professional. With respect, Mr. Patterson, I think that perspective overlooks some significant economic benefits. Arts programs don't just enrich communities culturally, they create jobs, attract tourism, and revitalize neighborhoods. The creative economy generates billions in revenue annually. But how do you quantify cultural impact? Patterson challenged. The same way you quantify any business investment, Maya replied. You measure outcomes. Increase property values, reduce crime rates, higher graduation rates in schools with strong arts programs, small business growth in arts districts. The data is there if you're willing to look for it. Alexander was watching this exchange with obvious pride, but it was Richard Morrison's reaction that surprised Maya most. The board chairman was nodding thoughtfully, clearly impressed by her articulate defense of her position. You make a compelling case, Richard said. Perhaps we've been too narrow in our definition of valuable investments. As coffee was served, Elena turned to Maya with a question that felt more personal than professional. What are your long-term goals? Both professionally and personally? Maya glanced at Alexander, knowing that her answer would need to navigate the complexity of their arrangement while remaining truthful about her ambitions. Professionally, I want to build a design practice that serves both commercial clients and causes I care about, she said. I'd like to prove that you can do well financially while also doing good in the world. And personally? Elena pressed. Maya looked directly at Alexander as she answered. I want to be with someone who challenges me to be better than I am. Someone who shares my values and supports my dreams. Someone who sees partnership as a way to amplify each other's strengths. The emotion in her voice was entirely genuine, and everyone at the table could hear it. This was no longer about convincing them that her relationship with Alexander was real. It was about acknowledging to herself that her feelings had become deeper and more complex than she had ever intended. After dinner, as the group moved to the restaurant's private lounge for brandy and cigars, Richard Morrison pulled Alexander aside while Elena engaged Maya in conversation about art market trends. Your young lady is impressive, Richard said quietly. Intelligent, articulate, passionate about things that matter. She's nothing like your previous companions. Maya is extraordinary, Alexander agreed. She's changed how I think about everything. I can see that. The question is, has she changed how you approach business decisions? The board needs to know that your personal life won't interfere with your professional judgment. Alexander looked across the room at Maya, who was animatedly discussing the intersection of art and social justice with Elena. She's made me more thoughtful, more strategic. She asks questions that force me to examine my assumptions and consider broader implications of my decisions. That could be valuable, Richard admitted. We've sometimes worried that your enthusiasm for progressive initiatives might override practical business considerations. If Maya helps you balance idealism with realism, that would address some of our concerns. She does, Alexander said, realizing as he spoke that it was absolutely true. She makes me think about long-term impact, not just immediate results. Meanwhile, Elena was conducting her own evaluation of Maya. You've handled this evening remarkably well, she said. Board dinners can be intimidating even for people who are used to high-pressure situations. Thank you, Maya replied. Though I have to admit I was nervous. These conversations will affect so many people's lives. You understand that? Elena asked, surprised. Of course. When businesses make decisions about sustainability, community development, fair wages, those choices ripple through entire communities. I know because I've lived in communities that were helped or harmed by corporate decisions. Elena studied Maya's face carefully. Alexander is lucky to have found someone who understands the weight of what he does. As the evening wound down, Maya felt cautiously optimistic about how things had gone. The board members had seemed genuinely engaged with her ideas, and she had managed to hold her own in conversations that ranged from high finance to social policy. But as Alexander walked her to their car, she realized that success at the dinner had created a new problem. The more convincing their relationship appeared to others, the harder it became to maintain emotional distance from each other. "You were incredible tonight," Alexander said as they settled into the back seat of his car. "I've never seen Richard so engaged with anyone I've brought to a board function." "Do you think it worked?" Maya asked. "Do you think they're convinced?" Alexander took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Maya, I don't think they could doubt what we have even if they tried. What I'm worried about is what happens when this arrangement is supposed to end." Maya felt her heart skip several beats. "Alexander, I know we agreed on 6 weeks," he said quietly, "but I can't imagine going back to my life before you. I can't imagine pretending that what we've built together doesn't matter." Maya stared out the window at the city lights blurring past, feeling tears prick at her eyes. Because she couldn't imagine it either, and that terrified her more than any boardroom interrogation ever could. 3 weeks later, Maya stood in Alexander's penthouse apartment, staring at a contract that would change her life forever. But it wasn't the original 6-week agreement they had signed. This was something entirely different, something that had emerged from the success of their arrangement and the undeniable connection that had grown between them. "A business partnership?" Maya asked, looking up from the papers spread across Alexander's dining room table. "Look at the numbers from the last month," Alexander said, his voice filled with excitement. "Since the board dinner, we've closed 3 major deals, launched 2 new sustainable development projects, and our stock price has reached an all-time high. The board attributes much of this success to the stability and strategic thinking you've brought to my decision-making process." Maya scanned the financial reports he had shown her. The numbers were staggering, but what impressed her more was the nature of the projects themselves. Alexander's company was now investing heavily in renewable energy, affordable housing, and educational initiatives, exactly the kind of work that aligned with both of their values. "They want to offer you a formal position," Alexander continued. "Director of Community Relations and Strategic Development. It would involve overseeing all of our social impact initiatives, working with local communities to identify needs and develop solutions. It's exactly the kind of work you've been passionate about." Maya felt her heart racing as she read through the job description. It was everything she had ever wanted professionally, the opportunity to use her skills and creativity to make a real difference, backed by the resources to actually implement meaningful change. "The salary is more than generous," she noted, trying to keep her voice steady. "You'd be worth every penny," Alexander said. "But Maya, I need you to know that this offer has nothing to do with our personal relationship. The board made this decision based purely on your qualifications and the results we've seen." Maya looked up at him, searching his face for any sign that this was too good to be true. "And what about our personal relationship? Where does this leave us?" Alexander ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of his nervousness. "That's entirely up to you. The business partnership stands regardless of anything else. But Maya, I need you to know that these past 6 weeks have been the most meaningful of my life." Before Maya could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and felt her stomach drop. It was Dr. Williams from the community clinic where her mother worked. "I'm sorry I have to take this," she said, stepping away from the table. The conversation was brief but devastating. Her mother had collapsed during her shift and was being rushed to the hospital. Maya felt the room spin around her as she processed the information. "Maya, what's wrong?" Alexander was beside her instantly, his hands steadying her shoulders. "It's my mother," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's in the hospital." "I have to go, of course. I'll drive you." "No, you don't understand. She doesn't have good insurance." "The medical bills?" Maya felt panic rising in her chest. Her mother had worked so hard to support Maya's dreams, often at the expense of her own health and financial security. "Maya, listen to me," Alexander said firmly but gently. "Your mother will have the best care available. Money is not going to be an issue. We'll figure everything out later." Maya wanted to protest, wanted to maintain her independence and dignity, but the fear for her mother's life overrode everything else. She nodded gratefully and let Alexander guide her to his car. The next few hours passed in a blur of hospital waiting rooms, medical consultations, and anxious pacing. Maya's mother had suffered a minor heart attack, brought on by years of stress, overwork, and neglecting her own health in favor of providing for her family. Alexander stayed with Maya throughout the long night, bringing her coffee, speaking with doctors, and providing the kind of steady, calm presence that she desperately needed. He never once made her feel like she owed him anything for his help. When the doctors finally assured them that her mother was stable and would recover fully with proper care and rest, Maya found herself crying tears of relief and exhaustion in Alexander's arms. "She's going to be okay," he murmured against her hair. "And I'm going to make sure she never has to work those double shifts again. Alexander, I can't let you— This isn't about letting me do anything," he said firmly. "This is about taking care of the people we love. Your mother raised an incredible woman who has changed my life in ways I never expected. The least I can do is ensure she has the security to enjoy her retirement." Over the next few days, as Maya spent time at her mother's bedside, she had plenty of time to think about everything that had changed in her life. The job offer sat on her kitchen counter at home, representing possibilities she had never dared to imagine. But more than that, she had found something she had never been looking for: a partnership with someone who saw her potential and supported her dreams. "You look different," her mother said weakly from her hospital bed. "Happier, more confident." "I've had some good opportunities lately," Maya replied, not sure how to explain the complexity of her situation. "This, Alexander," her mother said with a knowing smile. "He's not just a business opportunity, is he?" Maya felt heat rise to her cheeks. Her mother had always been able to see through any pretense. "It started that way, but it's become something more." "Good," her mother said simply. "You deserve someone who sees how special you are." When Maya finally returned to Alexander's apartment a week later, she found him in his makeshift art studio, working on a new painting. This one was different from his previous attempts. More confident, more emotionally expressive. "You've been practicing," she observed. "I had a good teacher," he replied, setting down his brush. "She told me to trust my instincts." Maya studied the canvas, a portrait of the city at dawn, full of hope and possibility. "It's beautiful, Maya," Alexander said, turning to face her fully. "I need you to know that whatever you decide about the job offer about us, I'll respect your choice. But I also need you to know that I love you, not the version of you that fits into my world, but exactly who you are. Your passion, your integrity, your strength." Maya felt tears spring to her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "I fought it for weeks. Told myself it was just part of the arrangement, but Alexander, I love who you are when you're not trying to be anyone else." He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, and Maya felt like she was finally coming home. The fairy tale had become real, but more than that, she had discovered that she didn't need to be rescued or transformed. She had always been enough exactly as she was. 6 months later, Maya stood at the head of a conference table in her own office, presenting a comprehensive community development plan to a room full of investors and city officials. The scared young woman who had eaten alone in that restaurant felt like someone from another lifetime. Alexander sat in the back of the room, watching her with undisguised pride as she fielded questions and defended her proposals with confidence and expertise. She had not only accepted the job offer, but had exceeded everyone's expectations in her new role. After the meeting, as they walked together through the city streets toward their favorite restaurant, Maya reflected on how much had changed. Her mother was healthy and comfortably retired. Maya's design work was making a real difference in communities across the city, and she had found a partner who challenged her to be her best self while loving her exactly as she was. "Remember when you thought you didn't belong in my world?" Alexander asked, taking her hand. Maya smiled, thinking about all the times she had felt out of place, all the moments when she had doubted her own worth. "I realize now that I was thinking about it all wrong. The question was never whether I belonged in your world. The question was whether we could build a world together." As they entered the same restaurant where they had first met, Maya caught sight of a young woman sitting alone at a corner table, sketching in a notebook while picking at her salad. The woman looked discouraged, lost in her own thoughts just as Maya had been all those months ago. Maya squeezed Alexander's hand and nodded toward the young woman. Maybe we should go introduce ourselves, she said with a smile. You never know who might need a reminder that fairy tales can come true. Alexander grinned and followed her lead, ready to help write the next chapter of someone else's unexpected love story. Because they had learned that the best fairy tales weren't about being rescued or transformed. They were about discovering that you had always been enough, and finding someone who helped you see it too.